The chair at the end of the table had been empty for 3 years. No one touched it. No one moved it. No one even looked at it too long. It stood beside the Mafia boss's seat in the grand dining hall, covered in black silk, with a single white rose placed across the plate and a crystal glass filled with untouched water. Every year, on the night of his dead wife's memorial dinner, the most dangerous men in the city gathered around that table and pretended not to notice the chair. But that night, a little girl in a faded yellow dress climbed into it. The entire room stopped breathing. Forks froze above plates. Men in dark suits turned pale. A woman near the fireplace gasped and pressed one hand to her mouth. And at the head of the table, the Mafia boss slowly lifted his eyes. He did not shout. He did not move. That was what made the silence terrifying. The little girl sat in the forbidden chair with both hands folded in her lap, her small shoes dangling above the marble floor. She looked no older than 7. Her hair was tied with a cheap ribbon, and one of her socks had slipped lower than the other. In front of her sat the white rose. She looked at it with innocent curiosity, then whispered, "Why is this seat so sad?" No one answered. Her mother saw her from across the room and went cold with fear. "Emma," she breathed. Maravale had only looked away for 10 seconds. 10 seconds. That was all it took for her daughter to wander from the service hallway into the mansion dining room and sit in the one chair every adult feared more than a loaded gun. Mara was not a guest. She was not rich. She was not part of the powerful families seated beneath the chandeliers. She was a single mother in a black waitress uniform, working the memorial dinner because the catering company paid double for dangerous private events. Her babysitter had cancelled at the last minute, and the kitchen manager had allowed Emma to sit quietly in the back office with a coloring book. But Emma had followed the sound of music. And now she was sitting in the dead wife's chair. Mara hurried forward, her tray trembling in her hands. "I'm so sorry. She didn't know." "Emma, sweetheart, get down." Emma looked at her mother, confused. "But Mama, nobody was sitting here." A sharp-faced woman in pearls stood from the table. She was the Mafia boss's sister-in-law, cold, elegant, and cruel enough to enjoy public pain. "That chair belongs to his wife," she said. Emma blinked. "Where is she?" The room grew colder. The woman's mouth tightened. "Dead." Mara's face drained. "Please don't speak to her like that." The woman turned on her. "Then teach your child not to crawl into places where she doesn't belong." Mara stepped closer and held out her hand. "Emma, come here." But Emma did not move. Her little fingers touched the white rose gently. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the empty plate. "I didn't know." Something shifted in the Mafia boss's face. For 3 years, people had offered him expensive condolences. Politicians had bowed their heads. Priests had prayed. Men who feared him had placed flowers on his wife's grave with hands that shook. But no one had ever apologized to the empty chair like it could still hear. No one except this child. The sister-in-law snapped, "Remove them both." 2 guards near the wall stepped forward. Mara instantly moved between them and her daughter. "She is 7, she said, her voice shaking but firm. "She made a mistake. Blame me, not her." One of the guards hesitated. The sister-in-law laughed softly. How touching. A waitress defending a little trespasser. Mara's jaw tightened. "She's not a trespasser," she said. "She's my daughter. And you brought her into this house. I had no choice. Women like you always say that." The insult landed in front of everyone. Mara felt it burn across her skin, but she did not lower her head. She had survived worse than rich people's disgust. She had survived unpaid rent, grocery lines, a husband who left when Emma was 3, and nights when she pretended she was not hungry so her daughter could finish the last bowl of soup. But this was different. Because Emma was watching. And Mara would not let her child learn shame from strangers. "I brought her because I work," Mara said quietly. "Because mothers do what they must. Because no one else was coming to help us tonight." The room remained silent. Then the Mafia boss spoke. "Enough." One word. Soft. Deadly. Everyone turned toward him. He rose from his chair slowly, tall and controlled in a black suit, his face carved with grief and power. A tattoo showed at his wrist beneath his cuff. His dark eyes moved from Mara to Emma, then to the white rose on the plate. Emma looked up at him. Most grown men could not hold his gaze. The little girl did. Then she said, "Was she kind?" The question struck him harder than any insult. His wife's name had not been spoken warmly in that room for years. Only carefully, politely, like a wound covered with expensive cloth. The Mafia boss looked at the child in the chair. "Yes," he said after a long pause. "She was." Emma nodded, as if that explained everything. "Then I think she wouldn't want you to eat alone." Mara closed her eyes. The sister-in-law looked horrified. The Mafia boss went completely still. Because the child had seen what every adult in the room had ignored. The chair had not been honoring his wife anymore. It had been keeping him trapped beside a ghost. And somehow, a little girl who had no place in that mansion had touched the one place no one else dared to reach. The Mafia boss looked at Mara. "What is your name?" Mara swallowed. "Mara Vale." "And the child?" "Emma." He looked back at the little girl. Then he did something that made every guest at the memorial dinner freeze. He pulled back the chair beside the forbidden seat. "Sit," he said to Mara. Mara stared at him. "Sir, I'm working." "Not anymore." The sister-in-law stepped forward. "You cannot be serious." The Mafia boss did not look at her. His eyes stayed on Mara and her daughter. "My wife's chair has been empty for 3 years, he said calmly. Tonight, a child finally told the truth about it. Then his gaze hardened as he looked around the table. "If anyone has a problem with that, they may leave my house before dessert." No one moved. Mara stood frozen, caught between fear and disbelief. Emma leaned toward her mother and whispered, "Mama, did I do something bad?" Mara's eyes filled. Before she could answer, the Mafia boss spoke softly. "No, little one," he said. "You did something brave." And for the first time in 3 years, the chair beside him was no longer empty. Mara sat beside her daughter with her hands folded tightly in her lap, feeling as if every chandelier in the mansion was burning directly over her head. She could feel the eyes. Rich men in black suits. Elegant women with diamonds at their throats. Guards standing near the walls. Servers from her own catering team staring at her like she had crossed a line she could never uncross. Emma, however, did not understand fear the same way adults did. She looked at the plate in front of her, then at the white rose, then at the Mafia boss. "Do I eat here now?" she asked. A few people shifted uncomfortably. The Mafia boss looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached for the clean fork beside the empty plate and placed it gently near her small hand. "Yes," he said. "You eat here now." Mara's chest tightened. The sister-in-law's face hardened with anger, but she said nothing. Not because she respected Mara. Because she feared him. That was the strange power of the man at the head of the table. He did not need to raise his voice. He simply decided something, and the whole room reshaped itself around his silence. A servant brought another plate. Emma whispered thank you. Mara tried to apologize again, but the Mafia boss gave the smallest shake of his head. "Your daughter is not the one who should be embarrassed," he said. The words landed across the table like a warning. The sister-in-law looked away first. Dinner continued, but nothing felt the same. The chair that had once been treated like a shrine now held a little girl swinging her feet and carefully cutting roasted potatoes into tiny pieces. Emma did not know she had broken a rule that had ruled the mansion for years. She only knew someone had been eating beside an empty seat. And empty seats made her sad. Mara watched her daughter with both fear and pride. Emma was gentle in a way the world had not earned. She still apologized to flowers, shared crackers with stray cats, and asked why tired people did not have blankets. Mara had tried to protect that softness. But poverty had sharp hands. Their apartment had a ceiling stain that spread every time it rained. The heater worked only when it wanted to. Mara worked mornings at a laundry shop, evenings through a catering agency, and sometimes cleaned offices at night when Emma slept at their neighbor's place. She was always tired. But she was never careless with her daughter. Tonight had been desperation, not neglect. The babysitter had cancelled. The landlord had threatened eviction again. The catering manager had said if Mara missed one more event, she would be removed from the list. So Mara had brought Emma, tucked her into the staff office with crayons, and prayed the night would pass quietly. But quiet nights did not belong to mothers like her. Across the table, the Mafia boss watched Emma pick up the white rose again. Careful, Mara whispered. Emma touched only the stem. Was this for your wife? The table went tense again. The Mafia boss's fingers stilled around his glass. Yes. Did she like flowers? A silence stretched. Then he answered, she liked wild ones. Not expensive ones. Emma looked at the perfect white rose. Then why do you give her this one? No one breathed. Mara softly said, Emma. But the Mafia boss did not look offended. He looked wounded, as if no adult had dared ask him a simple question in years. I don't know, he said. Emma thought about that. Then she reached into the small pocket of her yellow dress and pulled out a crushed paper flower she had made earlier from a napkin in the kitchen. It was uneven, wrinkled, and folded badly. She placed it beside the white rose. This one is more wild, she said. Mara's eyes filled before she could stop them. The Mafia boss stared at the little paper flower. And for a moment, the dangerous man looked less like a king of a criminal empire and more like a husband who had forgotten how to grieve without turning grief into stone. But not everyone was touched. After dessert, when the guests began to leave, the sister-in-law cornered Mara near the service hallway. Her smile was sharp enough to cut. Do you know what you did tonight? Mara held Emma close. My daughter made a mistake. I apologized. No, the woman said softly. Your daughter touched a grave. Mara's face tightened. It was a chair. It was my sister's chair. The words revealed something Mara had not known. The dead wife had been this woman's sister. For 1 second, Mara understood the anger differently. But understanding pain did not excuse cruelty. I'm sorry for your loss, Mara said. Truly. But my child didn't mean harm. The woman leaned closer. Children like yours are always used as excuses by women like you. Mara's body went still. Women like me. Poor. Pretty enough to be pitied. Clever enough to take advantage. You think he looked at you tonight because you're special. Mara felt the insult, but she refused to let it enter her bones. He looked at my daughter because she spoke kindly. The sister-in-law smiled coldly. Kindness is cheap. No, Mara said quietly. It only looks cheap to people who never had to survive on it. For the first time, the woman's smile faltered. Then her eyes moved to Emma. Enjoy tonight, she whispered. By morning, your catering agency will know you violated contract rules. You will never work another private event in this city. Mara's heart dropped. Emma looked up. Mama. The sister-in-law walked away, satisfied. Mara stood in the hallway, holding her daughter's hand, trying not to shake. She had survived humiliation. She had survived hunger. But losing work meant losing rent. Losing rent meant losing the apartment. Losing the apartment meant Emma asking why home had disappeared again. Mara took one breath, then another. She would not cry in that mansion. She collected their coats and led Emma toward the back exit. But before she could leave, a voice stopped her. You were going to leave without your pay. Mara turned. The Mafia boss stood at the end of the hallway, half in shadow, watching her with those unreadable eyes. Mara lifted her chin. I was told I won't have a job by morning. His expression did not change, but the air around him did. Who told you that? Mara did not answer. She did not need to. His gaze moved past her toward the direction his sister-in-law had gone. Then Emma, still holding the paper flower's extra scrap in one hand, whispered, She was mad because I sat in the sad chair. The Mafia boss looked down at the child. No, he said quietly. She was mad because you made it less sad. And that was the moment Mara realized the most dangerous man in the mansion had not invited her to sit out of pity. He had seen something. And now he was not going to let anyone punish her daughter for it. Mara did not know what to say. The hallway behind the dining room smelled of polished wood, expensive perfume, and candle smoke. Somewhere beyond the wall, guests were still murmuring about the child who sat in a dead woman's chair and survived. But Mara was not thinking about gossip. She was thinking about rent, work, Emma's school shoes, the landlord's red envelope under their apartment door. "I don't want trouble," Mara said carefully. The Mafia boss stepped closer, but not too close. He seemed to understand that fear did not always come from weakness. Sometimes fear came from having a child to protect. "You already have trouble," he said. "You just met one of its faces." Mara swallowed. "Your sister-in-law. Valeria." The name came out cold. Emma hid slightly behind Mara's coat, still holding the scrap of napkin paper she had used to make the wildflower. The Mafia boss looked at the child, and his voice softened. "Emma, would you like hot chocolate before you leave?" Mara answered quickly. "No, thank you. We should go." Emma looked up. "But Mama." "No, sweetheart." The Mafia boss did not argue. That surprised Mara. Men like him usually turned generosity into command. Instead, he nodded once. "Then I will have your payment brought." "I don't want extra money." "I did not offer extra." His eyes held hers. "I offered what you earned." A servant appeared moments later with an envelope. Mara took it, checked the amount, and froze. It was exactly what the catering agency owed her. Not $1 more. That detail unsettled her more than generosity would have. He had listened. As she turned to leave, he spoke again. "Mara Vale." She stopped. "Tomorrow morning, your agency will receive a call. Not from me. From my house manager. They will be informed that you completed your work professionally, and any claim otherwise will be treated as false." Mara's throat tightened. "You don't have to do that." "Yes," he said. "I do." "Why?" For the first time, he looked toward the dining room, where the empty chair still stood beneath the chandeliers. "Because my grief has made enough people cruel." The honesty stunned her. Then he looked back at Emma. "And because your daughter apologized to a woman she never met." Mara had no defense against that. She only nodded, took Emma's hand, and walked out through the back entrance into the cold night. Outside, rain fell over the mansion driveway. Their bus stop was almost 20 minutes away. Mara pulled Emma's hood over her hair and tried to hide her worry. Then a black car rolled quietly beside them. The driver lowered the window. The boss asked me to take you home." Mara stepped back. "No." Emma looked at the warm car, then at the rain. The driver did not insist. He only said, "He told me to ask once. If you say no, I leave." Mara almost smiled despite herself. "Ask, not decide." She looked at Emma's wet shoes. Then she opened the back door. The ride home was silent except for Emma yawning against her shoulder. Mara watched the mansion disappear behind iron gates and told herself that tonight would become only a strange memory. But by morning, that hope was gone. The catering agency called before breakfast. "Mara," the manager said, voice stiff with forced politeness, "we received excellent feedback from the estate. They requested you personally for another private event next week." Mara stood in her tiny kitchen, one hand on the cracked counter. "Requested me?" "Yes. Full evening rate. Triple pay." Mara looked at Emma, who was coloring at the table. Her first instinct was refusal. A mother's instinct knows when a room is too rich to be safe. But then Emma sneezed, and Mara remembered the overdue heater bill. "What kind of event?" she asked. "A smaller dinner. Family only." Family. That word sounded dangerous inside that mansion. 1 week later, Mara returned. This time Emma stayed with Mrs. Alvarez next door. Mara told herself that made the job simple. Serve food. Avoid chairs. Leave quietly. But the mansion felt different when she entered. The white rose was gone from the empty chair. In its place sat the crooked paper flower Emma had made. Mara stopped so suddenly another server almost walked into her. The Mafia boss was standing near the fireplace, speaking to two men in low voices. He noticed her immediately. Of course he did. Men like him noticed everything. His eyes followed her gaze to the chair. "I kept it," he said. Mara's voice came out softer than she wanted. "It was just a napkin." "No," he said. "It was honest." Before Mara could answer, Valeria entered the room. She wore black silk and pearls, beautiful in the way knives were beautiful. Her eyes moved from Mara to the chair and then to the paper flower. Her face tightened. "How sentimental," she said. "Are we replacing my sister with catering staff now?" The room went silent. Mara looked down, not because she was ashamed, but because she refused to be dragged into a dead woman's grief like a weapon. The Mafia boss turned slowly. "Choose your next words carefully." Valeria's smile sharpened. "I am protecting her memory." "No," he said. "You are using it." The word struck her. For 1 second, pain showed beneath her cruelty. Then it disappeared. "You think this woman and her little girl healed something? How touching. How convenient." Her eyes cut toward Mara. "Do you know how many women would love to sit close to him and call it kindness?" Mara lifted her head. "I didn't ask to sit near him," she said. "My daughter sat where no one else dared because she didn't understand your rules. Maybe that is why she saw the truth faster than everyone at that table." Valeria stepped closer. "And what truth is that?" "That grief should not need guards." The silence that followed was sharp enough to hear. The Mafia boss looked at Mara like she had placed a hand directly over a wound and still somehow made it hurt less. Valeria's face darkened. Before she could speak again, a man rushed into the room and whispered something to the Mafia boss. His expression changed. Not fear. Calculation. Then his eyes moved to Mara. "Your apartment building," he said quietly. "There was a fire on the 2nd floor." Mara's blood went cold. "Emma." She dropped the tray in her hands. It shattered across the marble. The Mafia boss was already moving. "Car. Now." This time, Mara did not refuse. The black car tore through the rain like the city itself had stepped aside for it. Mara sat in the back seat with both hands pressed against her mouth, trying not to imagine flames crawling over the cracked ceiling above Emma's bed. She had left her daughter with Mrs. Alvarez next door. She had kissed her forehead. She had promised she would be back before midnight. Now every red traffic light looked like an accusation. The Mafia boss sat beside her, silent and terrifyingly calm, but his hand had not left his phone since they entered the car. "2nd floor fire confirmed," one of his men said through the speaker. "Residents are outside. Fire department arrived 3 minutes ago." Mara leaned forward. "Is there a little girl? Yellow coat? Brown hair?" The man paused. That pause nearly killed her. "Checking now." Mara's breath broke. "No. No. Please." The Mafia boss looked at her, and something in his controlled face cracked. He spoke into the phone, voice low and lethal. "Find the child." The driver stopped outside Mara's apartment building just as smoke rolled from the 2nd floor windows. People stood on the sidewalk under umbrellas and blankets, coughing, crying, shouting names into the rain. Mara threw open the car door before it fully stopped. "Emma." She ran across the wet street, slipping once, almost falling, but the Mafia boss caught her arm and steadied her without holding her back. "Emma." Then a small voice cried, "Mama." Emma came running from beneath Mrs. Alvarez's coat. Mara dropped to her knees on the soaked pavement and grabbed her daughter so tightly Emma squeaked. "I'm okay, Mama," Emma whispered. "Mrs. Alvarez got me out." Mara pressed kisses into her hair, her face, her cold little hands. "You're okay. You're okay. You're okay." The Mafia boss stood a few feet away, watching them. He had seen men beg for their lives. He had seen powerful families collapse. He had seen enemies bleed out secrets and allies betray blood. But nothing had ever looked like Mara holding her child in the rain as if the whole world had tried to steal her and failed. Emma looked over her mother's shoulder and saw him. Her eyes widened. The sad chairman. Mara pulled back, embarrassed even through tears. Emma. But the mafia boss only lowered himself slightly to her height. You are safe, he asked. Emma nodded. Then her face crumpled. My paper flowers burned. That small sentence undid Mara. Because children do not always understand rent, danger, wiring, landlords, or debt. They understand the things their hands made. The mafia boss looked up at the building. Firefighters moved through the entrance. Smoke stained the windows of Mara's apartment. Her home was not gone completely, but it was ruined enough. Clothes, blankets, Emma's schoolbooks, the little table where they ate soup, the bed they shared on cold nights. Everything that poverty had spared, Smoke had touched. The landlord pushed through the crowd, angry and wet, waving his phone. This is what happens when tenants use cheap heaters, he snapped. I told you people. Mara turned on him. The heater was broken for months. I filed complaints. You filed complaints because you don't pay on time. Emma flinched. The mafia boss's head turned slowly. The landlord did not recognize him at first. He only saw a rich man in a dark coat standing beside a poor woman and assumed the world still belonged to his own mouth. And who are you? The landlord barked. The mafia boss stepped closer. The people nearby went quiet. One of the firefighters glanced over, recognized him, and immediately looked away. The landlord's face began to change. The mafia boss spoke softly. The man who just heard you blame a mother for your negligence. The landlord swallowed. I didn't mean. Yes, the mafia boss said. You did. Mara held Emma close. Please. I just need our things. Her medicine is inside. Her school bag. You are not going back in there, he said. It was the first time his tone sounded like command. Mara's eyes flashed. Do not tell me what I can do for my child. The words stopped him. Even in the rain, even surrounded by smoke and sirens, he heard the difference between protection and control. His jaw tightened once. Then he turned to one of his men. Ask the fire captain if anything can be safely recovered. Medicine first. School items second. Then documents. Ask. Mara heard it. So did he. Emma held her mother's coat and whispered, Mama, where do we sleep? Mara had no answer. She could survive humiliation. She could survive hunger. She could survive starting over with one bag. But she could not tell her child there was nowhere to go. The mafia boss looked at Mara. You and Emma will stay at my guest house tonight. Mara stiffened. No. Mara. No, she said again, softer but firm. I am grateful. But I will not take my daughter from one dangerous place into another without understanding what we are stepping into. Something like respect moved through his eyes. Behind them, Mrs. Alvarez stepped forward with trembling hands. Mara, sweetheart, my apartment has smoke damage too. You can't stay with me tonight. Emma leaned against her mother, shivering. The mafia boss removed his coat and placed it gently around Emma's shoulders. He did not touch Mara. He did not force anything. Then decide with full information, he said. The guest house is separate from the mansion. 2 bedrooms. A housekeeper will be there. No locked doors. No men inside. You keep your phone. You leave whenever you choose. Mara looked at him through the rain. You promise. His voice lowered. I do not make promises to children lightly. Emma touched the sleeve of his coat. Will there be sad chairs? For the first time that night, his face softened with pain. No, he said. Not tonight. Mara looked at her daughter's wet shoes, the smoke behind them, the cold rain, the landlord still standing there with guilt finally crawling across his face. Then she nodded. Only tonight. But as they walked toward the car, one of the mafia boss's men approached with a phone in his hand. Boss, he said quietly. You need to hear this. The mafia boss took the phone. The recording was short. Valeria's voice came through clearly. Make sure the waitress understands what happens when women like her reach above their place. I don't care how you do it. Remove her from that apartment before he starts feeling responsible for her. Mara froze. The Mafia boss's eyes went dark. The fire might not have been an accident. And the woman protecting a dead sister's memory had just become the reason an innocent child nearly lost her home. The Mafia boss closed his hand around the phone so tightly Mara thought the glass might crack. "Take them to the guest house," he said. Mara grabbed his sleeve. "No revenge near my daughter." His eyes shifted to Emma, asleep now against Mara's side, wrapped in his coat. Then he nodded once. "No revenge tonight," he said. "Only proof." By dawn, Valeria's driver confessed, the landlord's payments were traced, and the fire report exposed everything. But the cruelest truth came from the mansion's old security footage. Valeria had not acted alone. She had been hiding his wife's final letter too.